Call security. Get this woman out now. The command sliced through the lobby of Horizon Trust like a blade, sharp and absolute. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Behind the teller windows, keyboards fell silent, and the air turned thick with tension. Debra Langston, the branch manager of Horizon Trust's flagship location in downtown Houston, stood with arms crossed, her voice echoing with practiced authority. Her eyes, cold and unyielding, were fixed on the woman at counter 3, a woman who, to her, didn't belong there. Naomi Brooks did not flinch. She stood calmly, her frame still beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. She was in her early 40s, a single black mother of 2, dressed in a plain navy blue tee, faded jeans and worn sneakers. A canvas tote hung from her shoulder, frayed at the edges from years of use. Her baseball cap cast a faint shadow over her eyes, but not enough to mask the quiet composure in her gaze. In front of her, resting flat on the counter, was a withdrawal slip for $80,000, her ID and her bank card. Everything was in order, except, it seemed, her presence. 2 security guards moved in quickly, their steps deliberate, their hands hovering just above her elbows, as if expecting resistance. Customers watched with a mix of curiosity and silent agreement, a few with narrowed eyes, some whispering into their phones. Naomi's voice was steady, her tone even. "I'm simply here to withdraw money from my own account, nothing more." Her words were clear, her demeanor measured, but they fell on deaf ears. Debra's face hardened, her lips curling into a sneer as she gestured for the guards to proceed. "You've presented suspicious documents and made an unusually large request. This is bank policy," she said, loud enough for the rest of the lobby to hear. "Take her out." But Naomi didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply turned her head slightly toward the guards and calmly said, "I have all my identification. Everything has been verified. There's no legal or procedural reason to remove me." The stillness of her voice struck a strange chord, unsettling in its lack of panic. She wasn't reacting like a fraudster or someone caught in the wrong. She stood not with fear or arrogance, but with a quiet confidence that no one in the room yet understood. Debra didn't care to ask why. She had already made her judgment the moment Naomi handed over that slip. What no one in the branch knew, what no one suspected, was that Naomi Brooks wasn't just another client waiting in line. She was, in fact, the senior director of internal compliance at Horizon Holdings, the parent company that owned and operated Horizon Trust and its dozens of branches nationwide. And today, she hadn't come with a chauffeur, a designer suit, or a press team. She hadn't come with a clipboard or a legal memo. She came alone, unannounced and unrecognizable, by design. Her reason was simple: to observe. Not from an ivory tower, not through filtered reports or secondhand complaints, but directly. For weeks, complaints had trickled into her office, subtle patterns of racial bias, discriminatory service based on appearance, and selective courtesy. But complaints alone weren't proof. Naomi knew that to understand a system's failures, you had to walk through it like the people affected by it did. Quiet, invisible, expected to stay small. That morning, she had left her title and authority behind. She arrived on foot, blending in with the crowd of downtown workers. No expensive jewelry, no sleek laptop bag, just a woman with a modest purse, an unassuming withdrawal request, and eyes wide open. She took her place in the waiting area, accepted the sidelong glances from bank employees, endured being passed over by tellers for better-dressed customers. She took note of every detail. How the receptionist greeted the man in a suit 3 places behind her but ignored her completely. How the teller whispered after glancing at her ID. How the branch manager emerged from her office only when Naomi requested a large amount. It didn't surprise her. She had read the reports, she had heard the stories. What surprised her was how quickly, how seamlessly, those assumptions became policy. No questions, no benefit of the doubt, just a verdict delivered at first glance. Now, standing in the center of the lobby, under the eyes of a dozen silent strangers, Naomi knew she had enough. Enough to confirm every allegation. Enough to move forward. And yet, she remained still. Let them call security. Let them pull her out. Because the moment they touched her, the game would change, and Horizon Trust would never be the same again. As Naomi stood in the center of the Horizon Trust lobby, her withdrawal slip and identification still untouched on the counter, she quietly pulled back. Not physically, but inwardly, into the role she had adopted for the day. Observer, not enforcer. Her eyes, beneath the shade of her cap, moved across the polished floors, over the walnut desks and frosted glass partitions, and onto the living tableau of coded behavior playing out around her. She had stepped into this branch to uncover the truth, and it was already rising to the surface, like oil on water. To her left, near the main entrance, the doors swung open with a hiss, and in walked a tall, broad-shouldered white man in a finely pressed charcoal suit. His shoes gleamed under the lights, his leather briefcase dangling casually from 2 fingers. Naomi didn't need anyone to tell her who he was. The way the receptionist's demeanor shifted was all the introduction necessary. The woman, previously hunched behind her monitor and indifferent to Naomi's presence, now stood upright, eyes widening with practiced warmth. Her voice adopted a new texture, soft and bright like a carefully folded napkin. "Good morning, Mr. Hastings. Welcome back, sir." Mr. Hastings, a prominent local real estate developer, didn't even break stride. He nodded once, lips curled into a confident half-smile. "Just here for a quick transaction," he said. "Of course," the receptionist cooed, stepping from behind her desk. "Let me take you to the VIP lounge. Would you like your usual espresso? Or perhaps just water today?" Naomi's gaze followed them as they passed her. Mr. Hastings never looked her way. Not out of rudeness, but because he had been taught not to. People like Naomi didn't exist in his frame of reference unless they were serving something. The glass doors of the VIP room opened smoothly, revealing plush leather chairs, soft lighting, and the quiet murmur of personal bankers who didn't wait behind counters. Only a few feet away, yet galaxies apart. Moments later, a different image unfolded. An elderly Asian couple entered quietly, stepping into the lobby with tentative strides. The woman leaned gently against her husband's arm. Their clothes were clean but modest, and the way they paused just inside the doors suggested unfamiliarity with the space. Naomi noted how the receptionist's expression flatlined the instant she spotted them. The sparkle vanished. Her hands dropped from the folder she'd been arranging for Hastings. She didn't stand this time. Without so much as a full glance, she pointed past the main waiting area. "Take a number over there. Seats are along the wall." The words came out clipped, mechanical, barely more than a whisper, yet unmistakably dismissive. No welcome, no offer of help, no courtesy, just the same indifferent gesture Naomi herself had received an hour earlier. The couple bowed slightly and moved toward the edge of the room, where a row of plastic chairs sat beneath a dusty display screen cycling promotional ads. They passed no fewer than 3 empty, more accessible seats closer to the main counters, but none had been offered. The lobby seemed to swallow them. Naomi's heart tightened, not in anger, but in recognition. It was a pattern she'd seen before, many times, in many institutions. The ones who arrived looking uncertain, whose accents marked them, whose skin or clothing placed them outside the invisible perimeter of privilege, were ushered to the shadows. And the ones who walked in radiating money or whiteness were met with open doors and soft tones. She didn't need to hear insults to know this place was cracked. It was in the details, the way Linda, the senior receptionist, bent her tone only for men in suits. The way a younger teller laughed too loudly at a white college student's joke, but turned stiff the moment a black single father walked up with a check in hand. The way even the guards seemed to lean forward when a Latino man approached the ATM, eyes narrowing by default. Naomi watched it all. A white woman with pearl earrings and a Chanel handbag skipped the line entirely when she just needed to ask one thing. A teller welcomed her with a glowing smile and waved away the ticket machine. Meanwhile, a black teenage boy in oversized jeans waited nearly 20 minutes for a routine deposit and was asked twice to confirm he understood what pending clearance meant. Each moment was small enough to seem dismissible, but together they formed a language, silent yet fluent, etched into every interaction. Naomi didn't write anything down. Not yet, but she was recording, mentally cataloging every inflection, every glance, every time someone like her was made to feel like less. It wasn't just the overt decisions that told the story. It was the pause before eye contact, the slow tap of a keyboard that suddenly took too long, the fake smiles that dissolved a second too soon. It was the absence of welcome. She stepped slightly to the side of the teller window, and let her eyes scan the room again. Noticing how Linda leaned in close for certain clients. Noticing how another employee's posture straightened when a man in golf attire stepped in. Noticing how the elderly Asian couple now seated were entirely ignored. No one had offered assistance, even as they fumbled with a form. This wasn't about service, this was about selection. Horizon Trust didn't turn people away. It didn't have to. It simply decided who mattered. And Naomi had seen enough. She turned back toward the counter, just in time to catch a smirk forming on the teller's lips, one that vanished the moment she met Naomi's eyes. But Naomi didn't flinch or challenge her. Not yet. Because tomorrow this entire branch would find out who Naomi Brooks really was. And no smile, no coffee, no quiet apology would be enough to unwrite what had been recorded. Not on paper, but in silence. Naomi stood patiently at counter 5, a quiet figure wrapped in dignity, her well-worn canvas tote resting beside her on the polished granite surface. After observing for over an hour, she had finally stepped forward when her number flashed on the screen. She handed over her identification, her bank card, and a neatly filled withdrawal slip, requesting $80,000 from her personal account. Across the counter, the teller, a woman in her late 20s named Chloe Barnes, received the documents without a word. Her eyes swept over the paperwork quickly, but when she reached Naomi's name, Naomi Brooks, a flicker of doubt danced across her features. She glanced up, taking in Naomi's plain t-shirt, her minimal makeup, the soft calluses on her fingers that suggested work rather than luxury. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll need to verify this," Chloe said, voice clipped, professional only in tone, not in spirit. She turned to her computer, fingers moving deliberately slow over the keyboard. Naomi could feel the shift in the air again, that silent judgment creeping back into the room like a draft through a cracked window. Chloe kept glancing at the screen, then back at Naomi, her brows furrowing with suspicion rather than concern. After a long pause, she spoke again, this time with the faintest edge in her voice. "This is quite a large amount," she said, not asking, but stating. "Why are you withdrawing it?" Naomi responded calmly, "It's my account, I have business to attend to." Chloe blinked, clearly unsatisfied. "You don't have any notes on file indicating you're a preferred client or part of our premium tier." Before Naomi could reply, the rhythmic click of polished dress shoes echoed behind the teller's counter. A tall man in a crisp navy suit rounded the corner. Marcus Finn, the head of transactions for the branch. His badge glinted beneath the collar of his tailored shirt, and his voice, when it rang out, cut sharply across the tension. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, though his tone already assumed the answer. Chloe straightened immediately. "She's asking to withdraw $80,000. I'm verifying, but—" Marcus turned to Naomi, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her face, then her clothes, then the canvas tote slung over her shoulder. He didn't bother hiding his doubt. "Ma'am," he said, loudly enough for others nearby to hear, "can you explain why you need to take out this kind of money?" Naomi held her ground. "It's for personal use. My account is fully funded and the documents are in order." Marcus took a half-step closer to the counter, arms folding over his chest. "And what exactly do you do for a living?" he asked, eyebrows raised as though daring her to justify her presence. The insinuation lingered between them, sharp, unmistakable. Naomi didn't flinch. "That's not required for a personal withdrawal." The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to Chloe. "Put this on hold. We need additional verification." Naomi opened her mouth to object, but before she could speak, a new voice sliced through the room. "What's going on here?" The room hushed. Even Chloe looked startled. From the side hallway near the executive offices, a woman emerged, tall, commanding, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled into a severe twist and heels that snapped with every step. Debra Langston, the branch manager. She looked directly at Chloe, then at Marcus, then at Naomi. Her gaze barely concealed the disdain that curled beneath her words. "Why hasn't this been resolved? Why is this amount even being processed?" "She has the documents," Chloe mumbled. "But she's not a premium." "She doesn't look like one," Debra snapped, finishing the sentence. Her voice dropped lower, but it carried farther. "We don't serve this demographic in that tier. That's not the kind of clientele we're designed for." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Excuse me?" Debra folded her arms and stepped closer. "Let me be clear. Horizon Trust is a private financial institution. We specialize in high-net-worth individuals with established portfolios and verified affiliations. You, she paused, eyes scanning Naomi from top to toe, don't fit that profile. A flush rose in Chloe's face. Even Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but neither objected. Naomi's voice remained steady, almost too calm for the moment. I've banked here for years. My funds are mine. My account is active. Are you saying I can't access it because of how I look? Debra's eyes narrowed. I'm saying you don't belong in this branch. A hush swept the lobby. The phrase echoed like an accusation. A few heads turned. A woman nearby lowered her phone from her ear. A man in a sports coat furrowed his brow. The energy in the air shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Naomi didn't react, not with rage, not with shame, only silence. The kind of silence that holds power, not from helplessness, but from knowledge, from restraint. Her fingers moved slowly to her tote. She didn't reach for her ID or for her phone, not yet. Not until they had said every word they needed to say, every prejudice they still tried to coat in policy. She would let them speak, let them expose themselves, because soon they would learn who she was. And when they did, this room would never feel safe in its assumptions again. The air inside the bank had thickened with disbelief. The quiet murmurs that followed Debra Langston's declaration. We don't serve this demographic in that tier, now hung like a fog over the room. Naomi Brooks stood at the eye of that storm, motionless. Her shoulders were squared, her expression impassive, yet behind her calm eyes, something had shifted. Back in New York, across time zones and glass towers, Jared Kim was already in motion. The group CEO of Horizon Holdings, a man known for his surgical precision in leadership and near-legendary intolerance for ethical violations, had just finished reviewing 2 flagged complaints from internal whistleblowers about Houston's discriminatory service patterns. He hadn't yet found solid evidence, until now. His executive assistant barged in without knocking, pale, holding up her phone screen. Sir, Houston, downtown branch, it's happening. Right now. He didn't ask for context. He didn't need it. Pull the feed. Within 60 seconds, the boardroom at Horizon's global headquarters lit up with the live security feed from the Houston branch. The camera view, streaming high resolution from the ceiling-mounted lens, panned across the floor to reveal Naomi Brooks standing silently before the teller window as multiple employees encircled her like she was a suspect. Her canvas tote still hung loosely from her shoulder. Her posture was unthreatening, her presence unshakable. The image filled the screen. Jared leaned forward, jaw set. Sandra Yee, Chief Compliance Officer, entered and halted mid-step. That's Naomi? That's her. Robert Tate, Head of Corporate Affairs, looked stunned. Wait, she went in undercover? Jared's voice cut through the room like tempered steel. No one moves. No one leaves that branch. Keep the feed up. I'm heading there myself. His orders echoed through the executive floor. Compliance, legal, ethics, and operations staff snapped into motion as Jared strode from the room, already calling his driver, his voice low but burning. She warned me she'd do a field check. I didn't expect them to walk into it this blindly. Meanwhile, back in Houston, Naomi's silence broke. She stepped forward, slow but deliberate, her hand reaching into the canvas tote, not for a phone, not for papers, but for something far more powerful. A matte black card case, small and sturdy. From it, she pulled a thick business card. No ornate design, no slogan, just a name embossed in fine gold ink. She placed it gently on the counter between herself and Chloe Barnes, who had now stepped back, trembling. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear enough for the entire lobby to hear. My name is Naomi Brooks, she said, scanning the staff. Chloe, Marcus, Debra, one by one. I am the Global Director of Ethical Compliance and Internal Audit for Horizon Holdings, the parent company of this institution. There was no pride in her voice, no need for grandeur, only precision, only truth. A pin could have dropped in that lobby and everyone would have heard it. Debra Langston visibly recoiled, color draining from her face. Marcus took a half step back, jaw slack. Chloe turned ghost white. A few customers gasped audibly. One man dropped his phone in disbelief. Naomi continued, her tone unwavering. For the last 72 hours, I've been conducting a covert evaluation of this branch in response to multiple flagged complaints. Everything I experienced here, every word, every delay, every unspoken bias, has confirmed the accuracy of those reports. And as of this moment, I am no longer observing. I am reporting. Gasps and murmurs filled the space, building from the back to the front like a rolling wave of realization. I am the one, Naomi declared, who will determine the future of this branch, its leadership, and its compliance record. And make no mistake, what happened here today will not be hidden behind a report or a private conversation. It is being reviewed, live, by the board. The double doors at the far end of the lobby swung open. All eyes turned. Jared Kim walked in, flanked by two senior executives from legal and internal policy. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a black sweater and overcoat, but every person in the room recognized the weight of his presence. His expression gave away nothing. He moved past the tellers without acknowledgement, his gaze locked on Debra, then Marcus, then Naomi. He nodded once to Naomi. Everything's been recorded. Naomi gave a slight nod in return. Jared turned to address the staff, his voice quiet but authoritative enough to command absolute silence. We've watched every second. We've seen who was dismissed, who was humiliated, who was believed without question, and who was doubted for simply existing in this space. His eyes landed on Debra, then Marcus. There will be no denials, no reports to distort the truth, and no chance to spin this behind closed doors. Chloe was trembling behind the counter. Marcus had gone rigid, eyes flicking back and forth as though searching for a way to undo the last 10 minutes. Debra's lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. She knew it was over. Her reign of silent exclusion, of dressed-up biastista's protocol, had just collapsed beneath her feet. Jared took one final glance around the room. To the customers here, he said, we owe you a public apology. To the staff, especially those who stood silent, understand this. Silence is complicity, and Horizon Holdings does not tolerate complicity and injustice. He stepped back and gave the floor to Naomi. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This, she said, is what accountability looks like. Not tomorrow. Not after a PR campaign. Now. And with that, the tide turned. Not in anger, in reckoning, in revelation, in the clarity that comes only when the truth has spoken for itself. Continuing seamlessly from the last scene in the Houston branch, where Jared Kim's arrival brought the quiet wrath of executive power into the open, the mood in the lobby shifted again. Not with fear, but with the slow-building anticipation of long-overdue justice. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed steadily as Naomi Brooks stepped forward once more. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her authority didn't come from volume, but from the clarity of purpose in her gaze, the composure in her presence, and the undeniable weight of truth in her words. She turned first toward Debra Langston, who stood like a statue of disbelief near the teller counters. Her once imperious posture had crumbled into stiff rigidity, arms locked, face pale, eyes wide and searching, though no escape could be found in any corner of the room. Debra Langston, Naomi began, her voice clear and resolute. You are hereby terminated, effective immediately, for gross ethical misconduct, abuse of managerial authority, and violation of Horizon Trust's anti-discrimination policy. Debra didn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words followed. Her silence was not stoicism, it was the hollow emptiness of someone watching their legacy disintegrate in front of a crowd. Naomi's gaze shifted next to Marcus Finn, the department supervisor who had dared to interrogate her financial legitimacy simply because of how she looked. Marcus Finn, she continued, you are also terminated, effective immediately. Your behavior today, publicly challenging a lawful client transaction based on nothing more than presumption, was not only unethical, but humiliating. That is not leadership. That is prejudice with a tie. A gasp rippled through the room. Chloe Barnes, still trembling behind her terminal, had begun to silently weep. The shame that had been festering beneath her nervous exterior finally overflowed, but Naomi's voice remained steady. Jason McAdams, Naomi said, turning toward the tall, lanky customer associate who had watched with a smirk and whispered casual cruelty during the entire episode, you, too, are terminated. Your role in perpetuating this culture of mockery and profiling is documented and inexcusable. A hush followed. For a moment, no one moved. The three employees, Debra, Marcus, Jason, stood like relics of a crumbling structure, shadows of a system no longer defensible. Naomi wasn't finished. She turned slightly, addressing the next group, those whose behavior hadn't been overtly abusive, but who had participated through silent compliance. Chloe Barnes, Carl Redding, Dean Patterson, she said, each name measured, precise. You are suspended with immediate effect pending internal review. Your actions and your inactions will be assessed. This is not a punishment, it's a reckoning, because silence in the face of wrongdoing is a form of participation. Chloe sobbed openly now, her face buried in her hands. Carl and Dean remained stiff, uncertain whether to argue or accept the moment as their unavoidable truth. Jared Kim stood at Naomi's side now, nodding once, signaling to the regional ethics officer behind him to initiate HR protocol. Naomi stepped back slightly, her eyes now sweeping the entire lobby, speaking not only to the staff, but to the customers who had watched this unfold with recording phones, hushed whispers, and widening eyes. A bank, Naomi said, is not a place to sort human beings by how they dress, what language they speak, or the color of their skin. It is not a gateway for the entitled, but a pillar of trust for everyone who walks through its doors. We are not in the business of judging value by appearance. Her words hit harder than any press release ever could, and as they echoed across the polished walls, the videos already taken, framed in high resolution with Naomi at the center, began to surface online. One by one, they traveled from phones to social feeds, from group chats to newsrooms. Within an hour, the footage of Naomi calmly placing her business card on the counter, identifying herself as a senior executive, and systematically dismantling an entire structure of discrimination began to go viral. Justice in banking, her money her right, Naomi Brooks, no bias behind the glass. The hashtags flooded timelines across platforms, resonating with people far beyond Texas. The banking sector, the corporate world, and the social justice community all converged in a storm of support and calls for accountability. CNN ran a segment by evening, a quiet revolution at Horizon Trust. NPR called her the auditor with a backbone of steel. Even The Atlantic published a detailed analysis on the subtle evolution of workplace discrimination and the power of silent resistance, led by Naomi Brooks. But Naomi herself didn't speak to the press. She issued no statements. She didn't grant interviews. She refused offers from talk shows, ignored praise from politicians, and declined profiles from magazines. There were no self-congratulatory tweets, no LinkedIn posts, no celebratory photos. She let her work, her clarity, and her actions speak. Jared Kim, however, did speak on behalf of Horizon Holdings. In a formal press conference, he stood behind the podium with the company's logo behind him and said the words everyone had hoped to hear. Effective immediately, Horizon Holdings will launch a full retraining program across all branches, led by an independent civil rights commission and overseen by the Ethics Council. We will rebuild, not to protect our brand, but to restore the values we claim to uphold. Customers across the country shared stories of their own, times when they were turned away, when they were doubted, when they were humiliated, but now they had a name, a moment, a turning point to rally around. They had Naomi Brooks. And though she never asked for attention, though she refused the spotlight, the world gave it to her anyway. Not because she wanted it, but because she had earned it. Not through volume, not through outrage, but through a steady refusal to let injustice go unanswered. Through quiet authority. Through the unshakable dignity of a woman who knew the value of her voice and the weight of her silence. Naomi never sought to become a symbol. But sometimes, symbols find their shape not in noise, but in truth. And the truth had just rewritten the rules of power. The moment Naomi Brooks stood her ground inside Horizon Trust's Grand Houston branch, the ripple began. By the end of the day, it was a wave. And by morning, it had become a national storm. Footage from multiple angles, captured by customers and staff alike, circulated across every social platform, showing a composed black woman in faded jeans and a navy t-shirt, calmly identifying herself as the Director of Ethical Compliance for Horizon Holdings and holding an entire branch accountable, one sentence at a time. The video went viral, not because she shouted, not because she cried, but because she didn't. In the face of discrimination, Naomi never raised her voice. She simply stood still, placed a black business card on the counter, and let the system reveal itself. Her silence was sharper than protest, her calm louder than outrage. Hashtags lit up timelines within hours. Justice in banking, her money her right, Naomi Brooks, no bias no bank, news outlets followed. Opinion writers praised her restraint. Financial leaders, many embarrassed by the behavior exposed, scrambled to release statements of solidarity, but none struck as powerfully as Horizon Holdings' own response. In a public release signed jointly by Jared Kim and the executive board, the company pledged a full-scale overhaul of its training, accountability, and customer service models, starting immediately. A new policy was announced, the Naomi Standard, a mandatory bias intervention and customer dignity program to be implemented in all 312 Horizon branches nationwide. Yet even as the world spoke her name, Naomi remained mostly quiet. She gave no interviews, refused television offers, and didn't accept awards. Instead, she returned to her quiet office 2 days later, opened her evaluation reports, and simply continued working. But the weight of her action lingered long after. Weeks later, during an orientation session for Horizon's incoming ethics interns, Naomi was invited to say a few words. She didn't give a speech. She didn't prepare notes. When a young woman raised her hand and asked, "What did you do when they treated you like you didn't belong?" Naomi smiled. She reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out a matte black business card, and laid it flat on the table. "I didn't shout," she said, voice steady. "I just didn't step back." And then she looked up, letting her words hang in the air, not as closure, but as a beginning. "Someday," she said, "it'll be your turn. When they question your place, when they try to define your worth with a glance, and in that moment, you'll have a choice. So ask yourself, what will you do when you're the one being dismissed? Because some revolutions don't begin with noise. They begin when someone simply refuses to vanish. And now, it's your turn."